Hey there, Pursuing Freedom community. Thanks for tuning in today. If it's your first time here, welcome aboard, buckle up. And if you've been listening for a while, you know how much I love and appreciate you coming back for more. You will not be disappointed with today's conversation with Jason Seward. And man, Jason and I were talking before we started recording, and we've got friends in common, and he's got a wild story that's going to lead us to some really interesting things that I have a feeling are going to leave you with your wheels turning. And so he'll share his story of how real estate investing allowed him to quit his 17-year W-2 career and where he's at now with that real estate investing journey, but also how it led him into private money lending. And the reason I wanted to bring Jason onto the show is not just to inspire around the arena of real estate investing, but I think this conversation around hard money lending is super interesting, because if you're listening and you're trying to get your business going, or you're trying to scale your business, or you're just feeling stuck and your day-to-day mind is preoccupied with where's my next transaction coming from? Where's my next deal coming from? What I hope this conversation will do is inspire you to think beyond the next paycheck or the next transaction, and instead going towards what does the path to financial freedom look like for you? And how are you deploying your active income dollars? Because while we're building a business as entrepreneurs, we're trading hours for dollars. And it's not that easy to find the time to find more things to add to our plate, right? And so these passive investment opportunities that we've been exploring, my husband and I, have been an incredible outlet for us, and something I really want to bring to the listeners of the show to inspire you to think about how you can put your money to work so that it starts to compound while you continue to build your own business. So with no further ado, Jason, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, share your background, and then we will, I'm sure, have an incredibly inspiring conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me, Aaron. I've been looking forward to this, and I have, as we talked about earlier, I'm going to have you on our podcast here, as soon as we can get our schedules coordinated. But as you said, I'm Jason Seward. I'm from Southeast Virginia, a very small town called Surrey County. We're the smallest population county in Virginia, with 6,000 people in the county. So, born and raised here, left for a few years for college. And then right after college, or not long after college, I went to work for a Virginia-based insurance company, and I was a insurance sales agent. So I sold property and casualty, life insurance, annuities, things like that. And I, you know, at that point when I went to work for them, I've always had like an entrepreneurial mindset. It's since I was a kid. Like I more so just I have always kind of needed and wanted the control of what I do, and like the creative avenue to be able to do things and the way I want to do them and things like that. But I got this job right out of college, and it was an easy job in the sense that good income. I'm 22 years old, 23 years old, making more money living where I live than I ever thought I was going to make selling. And selling came natural to me because I've always enjoyed just people, and I had a product that I believed in, and so I just went to work, and that was it. So I dove into that, and I ended up spending 17 years with that company. During that process, I strictly sold for about half of that time. And then the second half of my career with them, I got into sales management, and that expanded into a pretty big territory of the state where I was managing other sales agents and admin staff, stuff like that. During that career, probably, I don't know, a few years into it, my grandmother was a real estate agent in my area, and so I was always around real estate from a very young age. And she was always encouraging me, you go work that job, but real estate's where it's at. You got to figure out how to get into it, at least to supplement that income. So I started probably at around, I don't know, 4 or 5 years into that job. I started flipping houses locally. We were doing like live-in flips. So my wife and I, we in a 10-year period, we moved 6 times. When I started. So we'd buy a house, we would live in it while we were fixing it up, doing a lot of the work ourselves, and then find the next deal and buy that one and sell that one. And we just kept rolling the money forward. At that time, I didn't know anything about strategy or, long-term wealth building within real estate, I had one goal in mind, and that was to buy a piece of land in my hometown and build my dream house on it. So all of those transactions early on were building up to that, where we ultimately bought a piece of land in 2012 and built our dream house on it in 2015. And at that point, in my mind, I was done with real estate because I was balling out in my career. I was doing really good, very comfortable, and it was a very secure career. It wasn't until 2 years after that, I didn't do anything in real estate for 2 years. I was just head down, working in my career. And 2 years after that, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which everybody, that's a cliche thing for folks in real estate, but I read it and it reignited a fire in me. I'm like, all right, my takeaway initially was I want to be rich dad. It's like I need to figure out how to buy assets that give me cash flow to buy more assets. And it resonated with me. So at that point, I leaned all in on the BRRRR strategy, which I'm sure your listeners are familiar with, but it was a buy and hold real estate strategy with single family homes. I jumped all in. I used my own cash, my home equity line of credit, and I also ended up getting a unsecured personal line of credit. And I was buying 2, 3 houses at a time. I'd flip a few and I'd hold most of them. And then I did that for a few years. And in 2019, I partnered with my childhood friend who was doing the same thing. He had a W-2 career. We talked every day, but he was doing the same thing. Like, we complement each other when it comes to skill set. So we just said, why don't we join forces and do this together? And we're still working a pretty demanding career. Kind of fast forward, that put fuel on the fire. And then about 3 years later, yeah, it was about 3 years we were partnered. We had scaled our portfolio up to, it was a little over 50 units. And I made the decision to leave my corporate career and lean all in on that. So, and there's a lot of nuance there of how I arrived to that point, and how, like, financially my portfolio was not giving enough income to match my W-2 career, but it was enough to pay the bills. But I had been very frugal all along, during that career. So I had built up a rather large nest egg to kind of give me the runway to go all in on something else and have several years to go after it and not stress financially. So I leaned all in and at the end of 2022, and it's been all real estate ever since. So
I love this. It's so funny. There's so many parallels. My husband and I wouldn't say we did live in flips. There was some minor improvements to the houses that we lived in over the years, but my 14-year-old son is living in his 8th home. So
yes.
we've lived in things that they appreciate. We buy the
Right.
next primary residence. We kept the first one. We buy the next primary residence. We
Yep.
kept the second one, so on and so on. And I also retired from my W-2 at the end of 2022. So we've definitely, and it was a 17-year career. So we've been
That's
living very
amazing.
parallel lives for
Yeah.
sure. One of the questions I have for you, because we failed to talk about the fact that your podcast is called Burning the Ships,
That's right.
right? And when people ask about when I left the mortgage business, and I always say, well, I burned the boat. I didn't even renew
Mhm.
my license, which was like, it was a full
Same.
departure. So
Yep.
when you took that leap and you talk about how you did set yourself up financially, what was it that you were daydreaming about when you were straddling the two lanes for a while? I mean, where was the vision that was so big that it gave you permission to walk away from a very lucrative W-2?
I love the way you phrase that question. I have this weird relationship or unique relationship with, like, fear and anxiety. I view them as a tool. I've developed that over the years where if something makes me scared and anxious, then I'm doing it. Like, I'm all in. Now, my wife is not that way, so we butt heads on that quite a bit. But I had this, I could see the power of real estate and I could see where I could take it, but the W-2, the demand in that career, that I mean, I had to focus on that career to sustain it if I want to stay there, was handcuffing me from doing what I knew I could do with real estate. So I knew I would never be able to do this You talk about a vision. I had this vision of where I could go with it. I didn't know exactly, there's so many lanes you can take in real estate, right? I didn't know which one I was going to take, but I knew that I was resourceful enough. I could figure out problems well enough. I was resilient, all those things that if I could just focus all my energy and attention on it, that I could build a life on my terms where I could have these a mixture of revenue sources in real estate that were ultimately going to allow me to do the thing that was most important to me, and that's be with my family, my wife and my two kids. I have a 12 and an 8-year-old. And that was, the way where I was at a point where I had two full-time jobs essentially. I had my business, my real estate business, and I had a W-2 career that were each demanding. And they were demanding a lot of my time. And the cost of that was time with my family. And I couldn't, there was no way I could sustain that. So one of them had to go, and it was my W-2. So the vision was more time with family, and that's all it boils down to. So
I love it. I actually had it was a mentor of mine one time who at some conference or something shared this quote that to a child, love is spelled Time.
yeah,
And sounds like
absolutely.
the ages of your kids, where they are now versus where they were when you took that leap, are very similar to where the ages of my kids, when we did our 6-month RV road trip and homeschooled during COVID
Hmm.
in 2020, we were like, this is crazy. And if we're gonna do homeschooling, why not do it from this little RV that we have, this tiny little vehicle? And I remember in that time period, it was a major turning point of surrender and this realization that the busyness of my business for the previous however many years had been taking too much time. I became very intentional. And what I love about your story is that you talk about how it was 2015, you achieved the goal. You were
Yeah,
in the dream house, you shut your mind off from needing anything more. And then 2 years later, that flame was reignited. And that was 2017. And so it was within 5 years, you've left your W-2. I mean, that was 5 years of exponential growth.
yeah,
I think that's really important to highlight for the listeners because so often we have these pipe dreams that are, we think 10 years, 15 years, when we retire, these lofty visions that we really aren't putting any attention on. And I've had so many people come on the show that share a turning point moment for themselves where something clicks, something wakes up within them, they make a decision, and that's all it is. It's just a decision. You were in a completely different mindset for the previous 2 years, and then you read a book and it changed your mindset, and it triggered in you the decision to move forward with this vision. And 5 years later, you're financially independent enough to now go full force into a dream, a passion that gives you time, which
yeah,
is all your kids ever want anyway, and your wife probably too. So
for sure. And I do need to say this because there was a very it was a particular moment before I had fully made the decision to leave my W-2. I was ready to go. I needed to be confident because I didn't want the stress of feeling like my wife was not 100% on board, right? She was saying all the right things, but I know that she doesn't view fear the same way I do. So I needed to hear that from her and trust that it was not just, I wasn't doing this just selfishly for me, that she was okay with it. And one night we were in bed and I just, we were talking about it and I said, I just want to know that you're fully okay with this. Like your anxiety is not creeping in or anything. And she said this and it was very profound. I've shared it a lot, but she said to me, I hope I don't offend anybody here, but she said, me and the kids do not give a shit how much money you make. We just want you here. And I get emotional talking about that because that's all she wanted. She trusted that I was going to figure out whatever was going to happen. I was going to make it work. We were going to have food, we were going to have shelter, and we were going to have love. And that's all she needed. And once I truly understood that and believed it, and we had been married quite a while at that point, but it was game on. And it was 2 days later, I was writing my resignation letter and it went from there. So that was a very key factor, a variable in my decision.
it's so powerful because you're speaking to something that I think a lot of people go through, and the fear is so strong it keeps them stuck. And what that looks like is, number one, a lot of people have a fear of getting started because of the fear of failure. Like they don't even want to allow themselves to give a voice to the pipe dream for fear of it being unrealistic or impossible, or that it'll take too long, or cost too much sacrifice or too much heartache or whatever. So they don't even want to get started. And then those who do, if you start and you don't quit and you keep going and you spend time with people that are on a journey with you or ahead of you in the game, you're going to get there eventually. And then a new fear sets in, which is fear of losing what you've built. And I feel like you're speaking straight to that, because before you made this life-changing decision and you were working your ass off in the real estate space and you're working your ass off over here in this W-2 job, and your wife and kids are sitting there thinking, yeah, I really don't care how much money you make because we just want you here. Meanwhile, you're not the only person, Jason, who's found themselves in this place of, I'm on this hamster wheel, I'm running and I'm running. And if I were to get off, I would certainly have enough food. I would definitely have shelter and we'd have enough love. But the fear keeps them running, you know? God forbid we lose what we've built. And I guess I just want to say, I want to acknowledge that you did it and that you took that leap, because there are a lot of people out there that are unwilling to do it because the fear is so paralyzing. So talk me through, you talked earlier, you started to allude to the idea of having resources and, being able to figure it out and all this other stuff. And you mentioned before we started recording that you guys were borrowers of hard money at some point in your journey. And
Mhm.
I was saying to you how naive I felt about roughly 4 years ago when I started becoming an avid student on things like passive investing, syndication, and alternative ways to create cash flow than what I had always known, which was just really residential buy and hold. I mean, we did a variety of different types of long-term rentals, short-term rentals, in-state, out-of-state, house hacking, whatever. But there's this whole other arena of apartment buildings and syndications and passive investing and all this stuff. And hard money was always this thing that was completely not even on the radar for me because I was a lender. So, number one, I want to know your experience as a borrower of hard money. When did you use it? When did you leverage it? Any mistakes or failures or risks that didn't go well? And then how did that teach you to be what you are now, which is not only a lender, but also someone who raises capital, which is another form of passive investing for someone like me or a listener who's a busy professional who doesn't have time to go find places to, buy buildings or to do hard money lending. Like a lot of people listening are like, I don't have time for that.
Right.
So I want to know the story as the borrower and what you learned from it and how that's informed you to be now a resourceful person as a lender to those that need it.
We got to a point after, like I mentioned, I partnered with my friend who is also one of my partners in the lending business we have now. But when we got to a point where we were doing so many deals that we were tapping out on our own capital, right? So we were having to turn down deals, and we didn't know anything about hard money at the time. And just through research and learning, we figured, okay, well, let's look into hard money loans. We started taking, and basically a hard money loan, for anybody, just real quick, cliff notes, it's a higher interest rate loan, short term, usually 6 months, 9 months. It can act in lieu of cash, right? So a lot of hard money lenders aren't pulling credit, and they're just underwriting the deal in which they're lending on, which is a distressed house that you're going to rehab and then pay them off either when you sell it or you refinance it. So we started using that, and let's say we would have 3 projects or 5 projects going on. Let's say 5. 3 of them would be our own capital. 2 would be through hard money loans. It was great. It was allowing us to take down more deals and scale our portfolio, but there were some pain points with it. All along the while, I remember having conversations with Bill, my partner, like, man, one day if we're ever lending this money, there's a few easy things that we can tweak to make this easier for the borrowers that would be easier for us. And I won't waste time getting into what those things are, but there were several things we identified that this doesn't have to be so hard. So as we progressed, and before we left our W-2 jobs, and my partner left his early 2023 as well. So, but as we We're leading up to that, we did start lending some of our own capital. And this was more private lending. So it's not hard money in the sense it's not a fund, it's not investor capital, it's our own capital sitting in our savings account, and we were lending it. Through that, we got the experience of, because there's a lot of like operating procedures that we just weren't aware of. So we got the experience of the correct loan documents and how to button up our promissory notes and our deeds and all that stuff, all the things we needed to check when it came to underwriting. And so we got that experience now from the lender side. We got the borrower experience when we were borrowing the money. So now, as we left our jobs, both of us rolled over our 401ks into self-directed retirement accounts. And then we really went to work on lending capital. We were lending money out of our retirement account, and those returns go back into the retirement account. So it's not paying us anything other than into those accounts. But we really started connecting the dots like, all right, we've got a business here. We left our W-2 jobs to scale our portfolio, to get into syndications and apartments, and we were going to be the operators. And we quickly realized, like, all right, let's pause that idea and let's see if there's something here in the lending space that we could build. And there was. We fixed, early on, we set up systems and processes that in our minds were kind of fixing those pain points that we were having as borrowers. And now we created a product that we could market out there that, now we're a little over a year into it, that solved a lot of those same pain points for other borrowers. And so it was an attractive product that we were offering to fix and flippers and people doing the burst strategy. And now, once we figured that out, we're like, all right, we have to fund it. We don't have enough of our own capital, so we have to raise the capital. So that's when we went the route of starting an SEC regulated registered fund where we're policed by the SEC. We had to have an SEC attorney draw up all of our documents and things like that. And now we're structured just like any other investment fund where you or any other accredited investor can invest in the fund. We pay 8 to 10% returns, or fixed returns, and then we pool that capital and we make loans with it. And we are profitable in that spread between what we're paying investors and what we're earning on those loans. And what it does for investors that's unique to our fund is we've been on both sides. We've been the borrower and now we're the lender, and we still invest in properties. So one of the big risks in lending is, what if a borrower does not perform? What if they don't pay? They run away? Well, we've structured our underwriting in a way where if we would buy this property, then we'll lend on it. And if they run away, if they disappear and they default on a loan, then we would have bought that property anyway. We foreclose on it. Now we put it in our portfolio, a property that we would have bought anyway if somebody brought it to us. So that security from an investor standpoint, our investors love it because they know that it's mitigating almost all of the risk that are involved with investing in this type of vehicle. And then from there, we just have to perform as stewards of their money and make good loans.
Okay, so a couple questions I have, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I am kind of curious, where do you find your borrowers, or are they finding you because you've got now such a strong presence in the real estate investing world?
Both. It's evolving now. Like I said, we've been actively marketing, that we are lenders through social media and all kinds of different networking groups for about a year now. Originally, when we started, we're the new lender on the block. So we had to get out there, shake a lot of hands, really sell ourselves to pull some borrowers away from, maybe other local lenders that they had been using. So there was a lot of that early on, but now we lean heavy into social media, which I think I mentioned before we started recording. I didn't even have a presence on social media before I left my job. We've gotten to a point now where our reputation and word of mouth is solid enough where we're having a lot of our capital has yet to exceed the demand for loan. So we're occasionally have to broker loans because we have so many loan applications that we don't have the capital for, and we do have some broker relationships where we can kind of pass those loans off, if you will.
Okay, so I would love to hear it from your words, but my experience with passive investing so far has been in things like syndications, which we had Eric Nelson on here doing a really great explanation of how syndications work and explaining that in layman's terms. So if you're listening and you're not sure what we're talking about, make sure to check out that episode with Eric Nelson. But what I loved about it was we were able to take some capital that we had, place it into the purchase of a building with another operator that we know and trust, and have pretty, I mean, guarantee is not a good word, but a strong expectation of the returns, the 8 to 10%, whatever they outline. And so every quarter we get this fixed check. It's great, but we also have a small percentage ownership in this building that is appreciating. And so for us, we don't expect to get our full capital return until they sell or refinance that building in 3 to 5 years. But the amount we put in plus any appreciation would be a long-term profit. Plus we get the cash flow. In this situation where somebody, let's just use $100,000 for easy math, that they place into a fund that goes into the capital that you are going to loan out. But these are to flippers. And so that 8 to 10%, let's just call it 8%, $8,000 just to make it easy. And do you pay that out monthly or quarterly? And then when does it start to pay? Not until they close on a property. And then is the principal return, what does that look like? Is that a 6 month? So is it a 6 month cash flowing investment and then you get your money back and you do it again? Or talk to me about those little details.
Yep. So this is where we are very unique in this space. And I will say, I have to give credit. So we hired, before we did anything, we knew that we needed a consultant. We needed a mentor and a coach. So we went out and found one of the largest lenders, hard money lenders on the East Coast. They're Rehab Wallet. They're out of Charleston, South Carolina. Now the CEO of that company is one of my best friends. We reached out to her. She's in a mastermind that I'm in, and we just got her on the phone and we're just kind of picking her brain about, is this, can you give us, some ideas of how this works, how it's structured. So I mentioned that to say that led to her consulting us for 1 year. And when I say consulting, essentially helping us build exactly what they have at Rehab Wallet. So I say that to say we are unique, and so are they, in the sense that a lot of hard money lenders, when they're set up as a fund or they're set up where they're taking in investor capital, they are tying that capital to each deal they lend on. So what I mean by that, Erin, if you invest 100 grand, I make a loan with that 100 grand. You are in first lien position on that. That I'm essentially a middle person between your capital and the end borrower. So I might say, I'm going to pay you 10% on that 100 grand or 9%. And I might make that loan at 12, 13%. So I'm making a spread. But if that gets foreclosed on, you're going to be in court. You're going to be fighting. You're going to have the stress of a foreclosure. The way we do it, which is unique in the lending space or hard money lending space, we pool all capital into one bucket, and then we're making loans with that money. So essentially, same example, you invest 100 grand, we're going to pay you, and this answers one of your questions, we're going to pay you 9% fixed on that 100 grand. It's either a monthly distribution or compounds monthly. So if you don't need to take that money out, you leave it in and it's compounded monthly. Anybody familiar with compounding interest? It works the same way as any other investment like that. We then take that 100 grand, it goes in the pool, and your money is now spread. We might have 60 loans out there, and you might have a piece of every loan, but our company, 608B Capital, is the lien holder. So if there is a foreclosure or 5 foreclosures, you would never know about it. It wouldn't impact you at all. You have 100 grand, that might be 5,000 of your dollars in one of those foreclosures. Does that make sense? So we spread it out, so it mitigates the risk of an investor being tied to one loan or 2 loans. It's just in the pool of money. And then our job as operators of the fund is we got to make sure that we're lending low enough leverage where if there are foreclosures, we're taking properties back that have enough meat on the bone where we can remain profitable. And we have to lend responsibly in the sense that we've got to make loans where there's enough meat on the bone to make us profitable and, sustaining a business model that can pay our investors. So that's our 2 biggest responsibilities. But from an investor standpoint, that's where we stand apart from other lending funds is the fact that you're not tied to one loan. Your money goes to work the sooner of when any portion of that money goes into a loan. So if you invest 100 grand and we've got to pull 10 grand out of it to make our next loan, then the full 100 starts earning interest, and it earns interest from that point on as long as the money's in the fund. So it's the sooner of that happening or 30 days. So we haven't had an investor yet that the clock didn't start on interest before that 30-day period. But at 30 days, if we've not put any of it to work, we start paying interest on it. And then we lock the capital up for 6 months. And after 6 months, it's liquid. So you can pull as little or all of it out after 6 months. So it becomes a true liquid investment after a 6-month period. The difference, there's a lot of differences compared to a syndication. I'm invested in several syndications, as are my business partners. But the difference is that this is more of a liquid investment, a lot lower risk in the sense in an apartment, a lot of variables can happen to make that deal go south, and your capital is always at risk at some degree. With us, everything's backed by single family houses. It's a very low risk investment. Hence, you're going to get lesser returns with this investment than the potential upside of like a syndication that might pay 15-20% over a 3-year period.
I don't even have any more questions because I feel like you explained it so well that I don't want to muddy the waters with more nitty gritty. I think the best thing to do at this point would just be to share the easiest way for people to get a hold of you if they want to learn, and also just to follow along your investing journey, because you're doing so many interesting things that it's very inspiring that some people might just want to follow you online or get a hold of you and learn more and set up a call with you.
And that's another thing we've done recently is we've hired a third-party company to manage most of our social media stuff. Again, that was by design because, as I mentioned, all I had was Facebook before I left my job, and I wasn't active on that. So I didn't understand any social media, but we're active on all the platforms now. It's 608 B as in boy, capital, on all the platforms. So we got Instagram, Facebook, we're on YouTube. And then our podcast is Burning the Ships, also on Instagram, Facebook, I think TikTok. We're everywhere on that. So we have daily content both about our podcast and our lending fund and all the other real estate stuff we do on that. To reach out to me, I'm just my name on Facebook and Instagram. It's Jason Seward. Probably a message through that is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then our website is 608 B as in boy capital.com. And that has all of our social media and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I know we could probably talk for hours.
I know. Can I tell you a quick, because I know we get this all the time. People get very confused by the name of our business, 608B Capital. So I've got to tell the story behind that because, it confuses people. My business partner, Bill, and I, when we joined forces, we had to name our LLC something. Well, we were college roommates and our apartment number was 608B. So we named it 608B Capital. So a lot of people think it's like a new IRS code or something like that. Nope, it's just an apartment number and a commonality we had. So
I feel like it's a way to remind yourselves, dude, look how far we've come.
We're still going. So
The college roommate days. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Jason. It's been really awesome.
And I look forward to having you on Burning the Ship soon, Erin. Thank you a lot.
I can't wait. So make sure you guys are tuning in to Burning the Ships. Lots of incredible, inspiring stories there. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. And if you do need to get a hold of Jason, you can't seem to figure out where to find him, whatever, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Pursuing Freedom Official. I love getting the messages from you guys that are out there listening. It helps us know that somebody's getting some value from this. So if you are getting value, please make sure to leave that 5-star review, because it really does help us continue to attract amazing guests like Jason and help you on your journey to building a life you don't need a vacation from. Think bigger, expand the vision, go grab life big. I love you. I appreciate you. We'll see you next time.